In these perilous times, see from current events how biblical prophecy is coming to pass in front of our eyes. You're watching In the Last Days, the program that looks at Israel and the end times with teaching from a Hebraic perspective. With Martin and Natalie Blackham, thank you to our friends and partners who make this program possible. Now, here's Martin and Natalie.
Hi, welcome to the In the Last Days television program with myself, Martin Blackham. Great to have you with us. Thank you so much for joining us today across the UK, into Europe and across the world via the internet. Don't forget, you can email us at info@inthelastdays.com. You can always visit the website and see what's on at www.inthelastdays.com. Now, at the moment in Israel, there's a big story. The big story is of the draft for the Haredi, the ultra-Orthodox. So we're going to be talking about that. And we have a special guest in the studio. You've seen him before, and I know that many of you have really enjoyed the programs. We've got Rabbi Lipman, member of Knesset. Thank you so much for joining us today.
So good to be here.
Great to have you with us, because I know that you're very busy in the Knesset, not just in the Knesset, but also traveling abroad for Israel and representing the Knesset in other parliaments and in other countries. So we so appreciate you coming across. Also, you're a very important voice for the Anglo community, and maybe, you know, with the middle of the Haredi thing, that's got lost a bit, and I'd like to re-push that, the importance of, in Israel, the Anglo sound and the Anglo voice in the Knesset.
There actually is an interesting connection between the two, because the ultra-Orthodox in the United States are much more a part of society. They work, they're doctors and lawyers and high-tech entrepreneurs, and that's part of what we're trying to bring that brand to Israel, where it will benefit the ultra-Orthodox community here and also broader Israel. So there actually is a link between the Anglo angle and the ultra-Orthodox angle.
So we were, Natalie actually was there. Natalie's behind the camera today. She was actually there in Jerusalem, and when there was the big protest and the Haredi, I think that's the correct way of saying it, or the ultra-Orthodox. These are the Jewish people who you probably recognize. I don't think all of them wear black hats, but that would be, is that a fair description? They would wear more very traditional clothes and...
Yeah, it's hard actually to categorize what exactly is ultra-Orthodox, and that's actually part of the problem here, is that the moment anybody voices an opinion of, let's have general studies, let's go to work, let's serve in the army, all of a sudden that means that they're not ultra-Orthodox, and that's something which I think is a problem. But yeah, the external, certainly people who see the black hats, the long coats, white shirt, black pants, that's generally what they would look like.
And maybe we can put that on the screen, and we'll show a photograph of that. That's actually the demonstration in Jerusalem. This is from one of the news agencies, and it says, Jerusalem completely cut off as 500,000 ultra-Orthodox rally against the draft. Now, what's happening is that for a long time the ultra-Orthodox Jewish people were exempt from the draft, because when the State of Israel was formed, Ben-Gurion said there are quite a small number of people as a section of society.
With 400 young men.
And so it's okay for them not to be involved in the army. But for a lot of secular Jewish people, they've said that these people are not just not involved in the army, they're actually not involved in community or in life in Israel. And the reason that they were demonstrating in Jerusalem was because there's legislation being brought in for them to be not exempt.
Correct.
Rather than exempt. They're not going to be exempt from the draft.
Correct. The law is actually going to pass very soon in the Knesset, and it's was a flag issue for my party, the Yesh Atid. There is a future party. And the reason for that wasn't from any kind of an anti-religious perspective, but it was a value of being one people in Israel. And also there is an economic element of an entire population, which is about 1/10 of Israel right now, about 800,000, that as an ideology doesn't serve, or as an ideology doesn't join the workforce, even though individuals always have. And their reason for not doing so was, we want to study the Torah, the holy texts, and focus on that. And we come from a perspective which says we value that. And therefore, there's no draft of all of them at the age of 18. They can have a few years to study. And even after that, there are goals that the Army has set out. And as long as those goals are met for Army or national service, the rest of them can continue studying. So from our perspective, it's a law which is very pro-Haredi, pro the ultra-Orthodox. It also says that anybody age 22 and over, let me give background. If you're in that age today, in the ultra-Orthodox community, and you don't serve, you're not allowed to go work legally. It's illegal to go to work until you finish the draft age, which is 28, which means that they're not even allowed to enter the workforce until they're 28 years old. We said in this law that anybody 22 and over, they can just go to work. They don't have to serve. And there are 30,000 young men who will be receiving letters saying, you are free to go to work. And that's a major shift for the community as well. So from our perspective, it's something positive. From their perspective, it's a shake-up to the status quo. It's a change from what they're used to. But I will point out one little nuance. They didn't call it a protest. They called it a prayer rally. And that might sound like semantics, but it's an important nuance, because they weren't saying the sky is falling, this is going to destroy everything that we know. They know that it won't be that way. It was done with a lot of sensitivity to the religious side, but they felt that even so, because they're being impacted, we'll do this prayer rally, and that's what it was really all about.
And they were blowing shofars, and I think they were. One of them said that one of the rabbis said the Shema. Is that
They
right?
said the Shema. They said a number of prayers, and I'll tell you the truth. As someone who's religious, Orthodox, ultra-Orthodox, there is a power to seeing that number of people gathering together to pray. I believe in the power of prayer. I personally pray. I actually posted on Facebook while they're doing their prayers just a few blocks away from the Knesset where I was sitting. I'm praying for our soldiers who are currently defending them so that they can do this rally. I'm praying for the people in Ukraine. I'm praying for the ultra-Orthodox, that they should understand that you can be a productive member of society in terms of a career and being part of the broader economy while also maintaining your religious beliefs. Because that's ultimately what this is all about. Is it possible to balance the two together? And I believe not only is it possible, that's the ideal. That's what we're supposed to be doing. And, you know, in Israel, there's this big religious and secular divide. It's a battle about what this country is going to be like. I really believe that if the ultra-Orthodox were more a part of Israeli society, then people who call themselves secular would be willing to embrace their Judaism more. They'll see that, you know what, you can be, look how observant they are, and they're still part of society, and they're still building Israel, and therefore I can embrace Judaism in whatever way I choose. I believe that's a necessary step for us to take after 65 years, not to be in two different camps, but to actually be together in the same camp.
And it's quite a big thing, because I believe you're having a vote on it in the Knesset in the next week. Now, one of the things, you know, and this is something which I think our viewers will be very interested in, and I was thinking about this, is the commandment in Torah in Exodus 20 and verse 13, that you shall not murder. Some people translate that as you shall not kill, because being in the IDF or in the military, would that be something that they would have to deal with? Or
if one opens up the Bible, you see from the very beginning that the idea of defending yourself is a core Jewish, Judeo-Christian value as well. So I don't think you'll find any biblical source that says anything other than you should be part of a military. And again, a military which has to be sensitive to their religious needs.
I was going to say that, because some of the needs are to do with kashrut, that the food is for them. Kashrut is the Bible law about what you can eat and what you can't eat, and there's also the washing, the water, and all sorts
Correct.
of different issues.
So there is a battalion called the Nachal Haredi, which is the ultra-Orthodox battalion. And by the way,
that exists already?
It exists already, and they just opened up another one because they want to be able to take in the soldiers that will come through this law. They are not only fervently religious and provided with prayer services 3 times a day, a Torah study session 1 time a day. There's a rabbi who's involved to make sure certain needs in terms of not having too much interaction with the opposite gender are in place also. And even in the dietary laws, you'd think it'd be simple to have just one set of laws. Well, there's many different customs. They have 8 different options in terms of level of what we call kashrut, the dietary supervision. So the Army, and they've said it in all the committees that I've attended, they want to take the ultra-Orthodox not to be less religious, but to be part of the Army, and they'll do what they have to do in order for that to happen. So that's also a sense of pride. We're living in a country where we'll go out of our way to meet everyone's religious needs because we want this value of being one people. That's critical to emphasize.
And some people have said that, that it's, I've read that some of the commentaries, and they've said, it's a splitting up of the country. But from your point of view, it's an integration. It's actually the very opposite of what they're saying. It's trying to reintegrate the country.
Correct, through a process, and that's the key point here. If I was coming out and saying, tomorrow we're passing a law, and the next day all ultra-Orthodox must, that would be creating a rift, because there's no way they would all come to the army, and then we'd have literally, God forbid, a civil war on our hands. That's not going to happen. We view it as a process with goals, very realistic goals in terms of how many boys should come. And what we're saying is, if somebody's only desire in life is to sit over the texts and to study, that is a service to the Jewish people and to the state of Israel, and they should do so. But we know that out of the 55,000 young men in that age group, in the army service age group, there's no way that all of them fit this category. And I would even go further and say that a majority don't fit that category of day and night. This is all they want to do. So for those who don't fit that category, we say you should leave the study hall after a few years. You should study and then combine the two together. And that's what I experienced, by the way, as an ultra-Orthodox Jew in America, where in our yeshiva, in our rabbinic seminary, we went to university every day to study, or a few times a week to study. And that's the ultimate goal, is to balance the two together, not to remain isolated, but to be a part of broader society, and, I should add, influence broader society. The more we're involved, the more people will see the beauty of the Torah, of Judaism, of the religious observance, and that's something which is also worthwhile to share with broader Israel.
And now you've been a few years, I don't know, I was going to say a few years, it isn't a few years.
A little over a year.
A little over a year in the Knesset, and how are things going? Because the viewers have seen you, they saw you before Knesset, you were doing the campaigning, and now you were introduced into Knesset, and how's it now that you've been there a year? And
surprisingly, it actually gets better by the day, because the more you learn how things work, how you can get things done, the more you reach out to more ministers and more members of Knesset and develop the coalitions to move forward with various issues, the more rewarding it is. In the beginning, it takes time for a piece of legislation to go through the process. Takes a very long time. Any project that you're working on, and in the beginning, you sometimes feel a little bit of frustration over what exactly am I doing in terms of accomplishing. But now that we've crossed the year mark, and first of all, I see my party fulfilling all of its campaign promises, one after the other, the draft, the education reform, the electoral reform. It's very satisfying to see that, and very rewarding. And even on the personal level, you start seeing the fruits of all the things that you've been working on. From day one, though, I can tell you that as the car turns the corner and I see that building in front of me, every single day I say, thank God. Thank God for the opportunity to serve in this kind of a capacity, and to be able to have an influence on the future of not just the Jewish people, but the state of Israel, and the way I see it, the whole world, because I really want this to be a platform to be a light unto the nations about what kind of people we should be.
Now, you were mentioning that you're also traveling and visiting other parliaments, is that, or?
A lot of them visiting with members of parliament. That's certainly a role that I play. United States Congress in particular, definitely have had a series of meetings on Capitol Hill, but also reaching out to both Jews and non-Jews actually throughout the world. I'm a member of the Knesset Christian Allied Caucus, which reaches out to both Christian members of parliament around the world and also people through various churches around the world who support Israel. And I have to be honest with you, I've been so inspired by that group in particular, because with such passion and such determination, they are stalwarts in terms of their support for Israel, and we need that voice, because we live in a world where so many not only don't support Israel, but they're actually against Israel, and members of parliament around the world who are talking about sanctions towards Israel and punishing Israel, the one democracy in the Middle East that's flourishing as a democracy, and they want with freedom of religion and freedom for people. And I always, when I go to these parliaments and these groups, I always say, do we have flaws? Of course we do. Do we have ways to improve? In every single area, we have ways to improve. And we should, and I don't mind pressure to improve. But can we celebrate the successes as well? And that's really what's critical, for people to realize what we've brought, not just to the Middle East, but to the world. And I, because of my American background and my ability to certainly in terms of English, but also culturally to understand the Western mindset, So I'm certainly able to feel that role, and I view that as a major part of my role in the Knesset as well.
And does some of that involve Aliyah, because you've been involved with Nefesh Ben Nefesh on a personal level as well as being one of their speakers?
Absolutely. Almost every speech that I begin, actually, I begin with the story when we got into the plane to move here 9.5 years ago, and the entire flight is everyone's moving to Israel. And with this organization, Nefesh Ben Nefesh, and the Jewish Agency in the State of Israel. And the pilot started speaking to us from the cockpit, and he said, we'll be flying at 30,000 feet. The flight will take 9.5 hours, et cetera, et cetera. And then he said, everybody sit back, relax, enjoy the flight. I'm here to take you home. And that's a message which people throughout the world have to hear. This is home. And certainly trying to inspire more Aliyah, more people to move to Israel is a big part of my presentations. I always say, I understand that people who are busy, they have a career, they're settled, it's more complicated, but raise your children to move to Israel. Let the Jewish people continue this process of the ingathering of the exiles and come back home. And
of course, it's something we've talked about on the program in the last days, the difficulties of the Jewish community to uproot in the diaspora, that they've settled, America's a very good example of this. They've become ingrained in the society and then have to uproot. It's quite a big thing. And
it is, but it's interesting. In our daily prayers, there's a line that we say about the ultimate redemption, the final redemption, and we say, and return upright, komamiyut, to our land. What does that mean, to return upright? Most of the people who came to Israel were running away from something. They came here broken, persecuted. Certainly the first few aliyot in the end of the 19th century, beginning of the 20th century, but then even after that, Ethiopians and the Russians, they were running away from something. Now we live in a time where we have the opportunity, not because we're running away from something in a broken manner, but to run to something in a very upright manner. That's we pray for it every day, to get up and move, even though it's difficult and even though we're comfortable. Again, I can personally relate to the challenge. I don't say to everyone, this is something you must do, but I want people to consider it. I want it to be on the radar screen. I want people to be exploring it. And certainly, like I said, if you can't do it, so raise your children. Raise your children. Here, the Bible mentions the land of Israel over 50 times in the book of Deuteronomy, not related to any commandments, just about the connection of the people of Israel to the land of Israel. And now we have the opportunity to be here, and that should be a fundamental part of the education of our children.
And where people are getting to see you now on the Knesset channel, or that's in Hebrew, you're very welcome to watch and our viewers to see it. But unfortunately, it's in Hebrew. But I think sometimes there's English subtitles on some of them. And
on my YouTube channel, there are English speeches. So if people are interested in hearing more about this overall message.
You speak in English in the Knesset?
Not in the Knesset. I'm not allowed to. But I have my own channel on YouTube, and I do interviews like this one in English, and have given speeches in various places in English, and those do appear on my channel. So
now, a lot of our viewers will be very fascinated at what actually goes on behind the scenes of the Knesset. Is it because there's a lot of what's the word, fervor, or strong feeling? There's a lot of strong feeling with the votes, and that you can see people. I mean, we talked about on one of the programs someone actually chaining themselves to the microphone on the Knesset, and people shouting. And is that what it's really like, or behind the scenes, or is it?
It's not. It's not, and I want to explain my point. Israel is a country that doesn't have separation of religion and state. We identify ourselves as a Jewish state. So religion is going to play a role in state. The moment you start bringing in religious beliefs, obviously that takes things to a whole nother level of passion. And it's not just about, let's say, the United States, about Social Security or about transportation. You're talking about my core beliefs, and that brings out a lot of that passion. And you certainly see that in the committees, in the plenum sessions. There's a room right behind the plenum which nobody sees, which I wish people could see. I wish there was a camera there. Although if there was a camera there, then people wouldn't act the way I'm telling you now. And you could have people screaming at each other in the plenum about an issue. And then they go to that back room 10 minutes later, and they serve us coffee, and they're sitting on the couches drinking coffee and laughing with each other, how the grandchildren doing. And that's something which I wish broader Israel could see, because there's the political side, and then there's the human side. And the human side, people have close relationships with each other. Very few things are taken very personally. I'll tell you an important lesson that I learned. I used to sit back and read the newspaper and see people who held different political beliefs. and I would say to my wife, what kind of a person, what kind of a Jew is this? What kind of a person is this? And I'll never say that again, because I disagree with them fervently, and I'll clash with them in the parliament, but they really believe that what they're doing is the best thing for the Jewish people, for the state of Israel, and they're wonderful human beings who, again, I feel are misguided, and we disagree, and they'll say I'm misguided, but that's a very important personal lesson for me, to really separate between what's politics and the human side.
Now, do you get to see much of the government? We in Israel, it's currently Benjamin Netanyahu who's the prime minister. Do you get to see much of what's going on, or in the busyness of the average member of Knesset, you've got so much going on?
There is. As you said, we're very busy. There are 3 times a week that we meet as a Knesset: Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. On Monday, the government comes, and the prime minister is there, and all the ministers are there. In our party, every single Monday at 2:30, we meet as a party, so all 5 ministers come as well, and that's a critical piece because it unifies us, and it's a wonderful hour and a half that we spend together before we go to the plenum. Tuesday, just ministers who have to come if there's a question being asked to them or the like. And then Wednesday, again, most of the government comes back again. It's a busy day of voting. So we do see them. The plenum is actually, it's fascinating for me. It's the opportunity to talk to the ministers. It's chaotic in that room. Someone's up there on the podium speaking, and very few people are actually listening because everyone is milling around and talking about it. If I have, let's say, an issue that I want to move forward, I'm working now, for example, on solar energy in Israel, on renewable energies. So if the Minister of Energy is that's my opportunity to, I can set a meeting with him in 3 weeks and have my 10 minutes, or I can grab him and we'll sit and have a coffee together behind the plenum. So it's a real opportunity to meet the members of the government as well.
And perhaps people don't really appreciate that. They see these scenes of people almost not interested in what's being spoken on the platform, but it's the connecting together.
Correct. And in broader Israel also, people always say to me, no one's listening to him. So first of all, it all goes to the protocol. That's what's most important. You're trying to get into the protocol. But anybody who's in that room and talking to each other, for the most part, it's business. For the most part, it's talking about a law, talking about a task force, talking about something in the news and how we're going to deal with that. It's almost always, within that room, we're almost always dealing with business.
Now, in the UK, our viewers in the UK will know this, we have what's known as Prime Minister's Question Time, which is very popular for the media. I mean, I try and see it when I get 5 minutes, try and catch a brief look at it, because it's not because it's just heated, it's just very interesting because it summarizes what's going on at the moment. It's Ukraine and the situation there. But do you have in Israel the Prime Minister's Question Time?
We don't have it, and I think we should have it. I've seen certainly in England, and I've watched it on TV, and it's aside from being fascinating intellectually, it's very entertaining as well. I think we should have more of it. I think the Prime Minister should have to answer more. There is something which is called a session of 40 signatures. If 40 opposition members sign a letter, the Prime Minister must come and sit and listen to them just attack him mercilessly but then he can respond afterwards. And when he responds, there certainly is.
So is that like a debate?
A little bit, but I think there should be more. I mean, as a parliament, I would like to see much more interaction on an official level between coalition and opposition, ministers and the like. And we do have the opportunity to ask questions. There's something called a shilta, which is you submit it beforehand, and there's a set question that you ask the minister. So we as members of Knesset do have the power to draw the minister into the session, and he has to answer our questions, but that still doesn't have the same dynamic as the entire parliament being there to pepper him with questions.
And just as we're coming to the end, it's been great to have Rabbi Lipman, member Knesset, here in the studio. Just as we're coming to the end, we're coming now into the Purim season, and I don't know if we'll be able to get the show out in time for that, but just to discuss kind of your thoughts on Purim as we're coming.
Sure.
Purim 2014, very exciting, and there's the schools are building up for it.
Absolutely. Purim is a very exciting holiday, especially for the children. It celebrates the time where thousands of years ago we were living in Persia, and there was a decree to kill out all the Jewish people. It's very interesting. Usually the decrees were in the way of religious observance. Stop keeping the following laws, and here it was an outright, we are going to kill them, through a series of miracles and things that looked like just regular political events. A Jewish queen Queen Esther came into power, and she had influence on the king Ahasuerus, and the Jews were given the right to fight and defend themselves, and they did so, and they defeated the enemy. And it's a holiday which we talk about the hidden, right? Because this whole story was God behind the scenes preparing our salvation, and we didn't even realize that was happening. So there's costumes that talks about also the idea of it being hidden.
This is from the book of Esther. If you'd like to have a look at that, that's the whole book of Esther talks about this whole story.
Correct. It captures the story.
And God's name is not written in it at all.
And that's part of the message also, that you can have a series of events which seem like it's not God, and yet it's God. And actually, the king, the Hebrew word is Hamelech, which is Achashverosh. Many commentaries say whenever it says Hamelech, the king, it's actually read it as God, because it was so much God, making all of this happen. And the celebration is about the fact that we know that God cares for us. We know that even if we don't see it so openly, ultimately things work out for it. That's been our story throughout our history. In the darkest of times, we've emerged, and look where we are now in terms of our own state, returning to our homeland, and prophecies coming true everywhere. And that's what the holiday is about. So it's a very festive holiday because it's one that we can relate to. We can relate to a Persian leader saying we want to destroy the Jewish people. It's very, very real in terms of the time that we live in, and our commitment and our faith to the fact that we know that in the end we will prevail, and that God will save us. So it's festive, it's fun for the kids, it's a family environment, and certainly one that we're looking forward to.
So I'm going to wish you a very happy Purim, and it's been great to be with you. Thank you so much for joining us today. Don't forget you can email us at info@inthelastdays.com. Visit the website www.inthelastdays.com. And remember, we're living in the last days.
You've been watching In the Last Days, a TV program with Martin and Natalie Blackham, the program that looks at Israel and the end times with teaching from a Hebraic perspective. If you would like to financially support the program or find out about conferences, meetings, or ministry products, then please contact us with the details on your screen. Visit our easy-to-use website at www.inthelastdays.com and register for our free e-newsletter. Get the latest news from Israel, product information, online video teaching, or watch today's TV program at a time that's convenient to you. Thank you again, friends and partners, for making this program possible.
See you same time, same station for the next program from In the Last Days.